The nation very much still reeling from that appalling act by a 15-year-old boy from Western Sydney. He was radicalised into terrorism and he had shot New South Wales police employee and father of two, Curtis Cheng, point blank as he was leaving work in Parramatta.
The gunman who was shot at the scene was of Iraqi Kurdish background from Iran, and he reportedly visited a mosque just before the shooting.
And to discuss this morning the issue of radicalisation of young teens in this country, we're joined by terrorism expert Professor Joseph Siracusa from RMIT, Oscar Yildiz, CEO of Bully Zero Australia Foundation, a cyber safety program that really does try to stop the radicalisation of our youth, and Sydney barrister and Muslim community leader Bilal Rauf. Good morning to you all. Thank you for coming in. Joseph, to you first. A 15-year-old who has been radicalised, it seems to be the trend that younger and younger children really are being targeted in this way to be radicalised.
Well, Deb, this is probably nothing new in the sense that the IRA did the same thing, the PLO, Baader-Meinhof gang, Shining Light, and my favorites, the Red Brigade in Italy. I mean, all these young people are attracted to these ideas, and this is something that's been around a long time. What we have now, of course, is alienation and loners. We have people who may be suffering mental depression. It's a very complex thing, and so de-radicalizing a group of people at a certain point in time is very difficult. In fact, it's like looking for a needle in the haystack. I mean, these kids are alienated the way a lot of maybe tens of thousands of Australian children are alienated and attracted to other kind of self-destructing things. So it's a big problem. We have to double down on it, and I think we have to think a little more about what we're going to try to accomplish.
Peter Stefanovic here. Oscar, this might be a question for you. The ISIS campaign, the online campaign, has been stunningly effective. How does it begin? How does the radicalisation begin? Is there a website that kids look at?
Oh, look, Peter, there's a range of strategies that extremists are using, but can I just say this again highlights the need for us to be able to go into schools and deliver to kids as young as 8. But it's befriending, it's basically a range of websites, it's a range of apps from WhatsApp to Facebook, Twitter. There's a range of social media platforms that are being used by extremists, and they're closing one account, opening up another. But this is not just about extremists using those technologies to do that, because it's a range of others that are grooming our kids online, including predators. You know, child predators are out there trying to groom kids as young as 12.
Yeah, it's just frightening stuff. And Bilal, we know that the family of this young boy are now cooperating with authorities. There's still a lot more to play out to find out exactly how this 15-year-old was actually turned to terrorism. But in the broader sense, how is the Muslim community reacting to this specific attack?
Yeah, Deborah, look at two levels. Firstly, I think like anyone, there's a sense of being appalled about what's occurred, and it is rather confronting. But secondly, there's an element of disappointment for this reason, that at a very early stage, the narrative about this incident has been framed by terms such as radicalised, politically motivated.
Well, that's what's occurred, isn't it?
Well, let me respond. There's 2 points there. Firstly, on the Assistant Police Commissioner's own media release, there was no information earlier on to suggest that this child was any threat. Secondly, they haven't had, until very recently, been able to get in touch with his family. So they've known very little. And the police commissioner himself said that they were in the dark as to what led up to this and anything about this, yet there's been this rush to presume that he was somehow radicalised, as opposed to, say, mentally unstable like the individual in America who killed 10, injured 7. So there's a real need for caution and restraint before making it some global or generalised Muslim issue as such. So there's been a level of disappointment. But the other thing to note is this, that again, if one is to analyse it, we note that he is Iraqi Kurdish background. Now, the Kurdish people are the very ones who are being targeted by ISIS.
Yeah.
So there's a few things that have been overlooked in the way that the dialogue is occurring and the narrative is being framed, and that's problematic because that doesn't help. I mean, what needs to occur is we need to take a pause, see what's occurring and allow for the investigation to unfold rather than preempt and inform the narrative with these terms which aren't very helpful in the circumstances.
Do you think that there is some confusion with respect to this 15-year-old? You know, as you just mentioned there, he's got Iraqi Kurdish background, and at the moment...
Precisely.
The Iraqis are a vast majority of them, and the Kurdish people are with the Westerners at the moment in their fight against ISIS.
That's quite right, Pete. And I mean, I think there are all these questions which have been overlooked. And also what has been overlooked is we're talking about a 15-year-old child. I mean, I've got a 12-year-old son, and without being in any way pejorative, he's not capable of being politically motivated, putting to one side understanding what that concept means. Now,
But that's your son. I mean, every case here is different. It's hard to sort of, as you say, to put everything in the one category.
Indeed,
you don't want to do that in any scenario.
Absolutely, and I agree with that entirely. And for that very reason, I think there needs to be a degree of care and caution in how we discuss this incident, particularly if we are to emerge from it as a society that can grapple with these issues. And I think in that vein, I do note that while we talk about it as a radicalised, an issue of radicalisation, it doesn't appear to me anyway at this stage that there's a basis for that conclusion at least. But to the extent that we do talk about radicalisation as an issue in itself, I note the federal government's assistant minister, she made the point, Senator Conchetta, that issues of radicalisation need to be treated separately to issues of national security challenge, and rather that radicalisation appears to stem more from social disaffection. So it's a more complex question, and we need to be careful that we don't adopt polarising narratives and which in turn overlook some of the key questions like, well, hang on, this guy's from a Kurdish background. They are the ones subject to ISIL attacks. So it doesn't...
It's a big contrast there.
It is.
Joe, just bringing you in on this, we know that the federal government, Bilal mentioned the differentiation there that he's welcoming, but do you think that the money that's being spent by the federal government in trying to counter this type of radicalisation is enough, or do we just simply need to try an entirely new approach?
I think we have to look at different and maybe newer approaches. I don't think the money we have aimed in this direction is enough. I mean, in America, we have 957 mass killings in 10 years by young people. I mean, there's no amount of money that's going to be able to capture that. We're going to have to think of new ways to do this. And I think the gentleman in Sydney is absolutely right. The police were very early called this radicalization and a terrorist attack, whereas in contrast to the Lint Cafe siege, it took them forever to call it a terrorist attack. So they think they may have jumped the gun on this one. I mean, we knew he was, we know he's Sunni Muslim, and of course the moderates are the ones who are being targeted by ISIL. But you know, all this, what everybody has in common here, the radicalization here and other parts of the world, is the civil war in Syria. I mean, if that civil war had been gotten rid of about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, or turned off, ISIS would not have risen there, would not have attracted all these kids. I mean, it seems to me that we should be looking at this in another way too, as we've got to stop that war. And we have to stop. That's the attractiveness of ISIS. ISIS is really is holding off the world. All the great powers, thousands of sorties, and at the same time, it's able to spread its message of Sharia law and all the rest of it. And it's very attractive to young people who are attracted to Bolshevism, fascism, Nazism, and all the rest of it, as a matter of fact. I mean, this is very attractive to young people. But we don't know, of course, if this young man was suffering from mental depression. I'd be very interested to find out why his sister took off. I mean, there's a possibility here that he had been programmed, as a youngster might be. And I notice also that he went offline in 2013. I mean, was he radicalized at the age of 13? I mean, is this possible?
Yeah, there's a lot still to be.
I don't think it is.
Still a lot to be uncovered.
Yes.
Oscar, this is exactly what ISIS want. It's these lone wolf style attacks. It's almost impossible to police. Okay. Andrew Scipione was talking yesterday about increasing security at the football yesterday, at the football today, but really there's not much they can do about that when these lone wolves go out. They're just going to go out and do it. So what can parents do? I guess that's the front line. What can parents do? What are the warning signs if they see in their kids?
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, Peter, that's what I was just about to say, that parents need to be responsible as well. I mean, it's a bit hard to have parents controlling exactly what your kids are doing, but there'd be key signs of somebody who's, I guess, downloading some extremist, I guess, propaganda. But the most important, I think, solution to this is, in fact, education. And we go out to schools, as I mentioned, and go out and deliver to kids as young as 8. Must I say, with no government funding, state or federal. But we go out to schools and customise the program specifically. But we deliver to parents, and we also need to deliver to all the networks that these youngsters belong to. You know, Joe was just talking about 13. I mean, I've got a 15-year-old, and to think that someone that young could be radicalised, but once they're radicalised, Peter, it's often too late to de-radicalise someone. But what you can do is go in and deliver prevention programs, not just to the kids, but also to the parents, but also to teachers and the various community leaders that are all involved in these networks. So I think everybody needs to take some responsibility. We can't hide away from this. We can't say this is a taboo topic anymore, because it's happening. And I mentioned 2 years ago that if we don't go into schools and deliver our prevention programs, the risks are huge. And I can say this will continue until we go in and deliver. And not just us, but there's a range of organisations that are doing a great job in doing this, must I say. But we need to go in there and empower our kids, empower the parents to take some responsibility and look for key signs. I mean, if your kids are online for 6-7 hours every night in their bedrooms, what are the parents doing? You can't give these devices to these young kids and go, here you go, we'll see you in a couple of hours. You can't do that. And parents, unfortunately, don't know what their kids are doing online. And there's a range of strategies that we empower parents to take to be able to say, hey, look, we have identified some key issues here with our kids. Well, how about you contact the key authorities? They should be able to hopefully go in and resolve the issue. But
Oscar,
networks...
That's a great point to make. Thank you very much, Oscar. We are out of time. And yes, we have to try to use these incidents to make us more community-minded, not less community-minded. Oscar, Bilal and Joe, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.
Thank you.